Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith here to talk about the breakdown and to go over my picks from UFC 298. So, one thing I explained, how this is a little different if you listen to my Sirius XM show. What I'm doing here is a little different from that. On Sirius XM, I'm there to tell you who's going to win. It's called the Smith Sportsbook, but it's like, who do I think is going to win? I went 5 for 5 with that. Here, it's more about who's worth a bet and who isn't worth a bet, which is slightly different. Still went 4-1 when it comes to straight up picks. The only one that I didn't pick accurately, I told everybody Dvalishvili is probably going to win, but Henry Cejudo is just the better bet at 2-1, and he did have a competitive fight. And I said, got to take the over on that one. I was correct with that. So let's go over it a little bit. Good night, all in all. It's weird. I'm a little torn because it was a good night for me. My picks did really well, but the favorites won. I mean, it wasn't like I had to pull out a bunch of MMA genius to pick these cards. The problem was almost everyone was a 2-1 favorite outside of the main event. Main event, slight upset, but once again, didn't have to be a genius to see that Volk might be at the end of his run. So I'm glad my picks went well. I'm not sitting here tooting my own horn because a lot of heavy favorites won. Great. Wonderful. I said pick a lot of overs, and there were a lot of overs on this one. I don't think I picked the under on any of them. But let's go over what I did here. Anthony Hernandez, Roman Kopelev. The reason I made the pick I did was Kopelev likes a clean fight. Hernandez likes a dirty fight. Generally speaking, in my MMA experience, it's easier to make a fight dirty than it is to make it clean. It's easier to kind of impose your will and make a fight ugly than it is to stay outside and super duper clean. That's why fighters like Anderson Silva, who could keep a fight outside and make it super duper clean, were so good and so amazing to watch because it's really hard to do that. Bernard Hopkins, if you're a boxing fan, could always had clean fights, and Floyd Mayweather, like you'd rush him and try and brawl. He would never allow that, and he would pick you apart in a very clean way. It takes an excellent fighter to do that. I didn't put Kopelev in that category of middleweight. He's not good enough to keep a guy like Hernandez, who always keeps you guessing and likes dirty boxing and a bunch of stuff that's hard to adjust to. He can't keep him on the outside the whole time. He's not that good. Now, there are fighters at 185, Hernandez will run into trouble, whereas he brawls and tries to make it dirty and awkward, he's going to run into a lot of punches. It's not going to be at this level. So that's pretty much how it went. Hernandez coming in, making the fight dirty, getting the takedowns when he needed them, putting pressure on Kopelev, and Kopelev not able to stay outside using his longer, rangier, cleaner strikes. He just wasn't in that position very long. This was a long-range striker who was stuck at close range for a long time. And when you do something like that, it's very, very difficult to win a fight when it's not at your preferred range. And Kopelev never had it at his preferred range. Hernandez got in, took him down. He has good ground and pound, good pressure. Same thing he did to Edmund Shabazian. This time, however, he was able to get the submission. Rear naked choke. What time was it? It was 3:23 of round number 2. If I remember correctly, I picked Hernandez, and I also said take the over on this one because I think it was going to be a third-round fight, is where I thought Hernandez would get it. It ended up going that long, so if you bet the over, you won it. I believe the over was 1.5. Merab Dvalishvili, Henry Cejudo. Now, this is the one I missed. Because I didn't think at 2-1 Dvalishvili was worth a bet. Not that he wasn't going to win, but that, if you're going to bet, you might as well bet on the guy who's a 2-1 dog, who is, in my opinion, this one a live dog. Of course, Dvalishvili ended up winning it by unanimous decision. I said, you got to take the over. The over was even 2.5 rounds. Have to take the over on this fight. And that's where it went to decision. Dvalishvili doesn't finish anybody. He's not a finisher. The one thing about this fight that struck me really early on was how much bigger Dvalishvili was than Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo is not a big 135-pounder. No kidding, he came up from 125 pounds. But this idea that over time, Henry Cejudo did okay in round number 1. A lot of people gave him round number 1. As it wore on, and he wasn't able to make his takedown a huge factor. He wasn't able to get the top pressure, the kinds of things that negate a size advantage. If you are a grappler, one of the reasons the greatest freestyle wrestler of all time was a guy named Borisar Saitiev. And Saitiev won all of his 3 gold medals, 4 Olympics, 3 gold medals, and in the same weight class. It's very hard to switch weight classes in wrestling. Jiu-jitsu, sometimes you can get away with it. Terere, my favorite jiu-jitsu artist of all time, won second in the heavyweight division, lost to Verdum. unreal. So it does. I mean, Jacare won the open division over Roger Gracie. Stuff like that. Like every now and then it can happen. In wrestling, it's almost unheard of that somebody moves. That's why Kyle Dake winning 4 titles at Cornell at 4 different weight classes is so amazing, because wrestlers just don't move up that often. So there's a huge difference when you have somebody that big on top of you. And Henry Cejudo was never in a position where he was on top long enough to negate the size advantage of Dvalishvili. If you're making somebody play bottom, or their size doesn't mean that much. If they're on top of you, it means a lot. If you're standing up with them, it means a lot. And Henry Cejudo just had to stand up a long time with Dvalishvili, and he started to wear down. Dvalishvili just kept the pressure on, was a lot bigger, does have great wrestling in his own right, especially MMA wrestling, simplified version of the kind of freestyle wrestling Henry Cejudo did, and he won the fight. Also, every time I see Henry Cejudo fight, I forget how awkward he is. Kind of this rabbit stance where his head's really far up, and it works for him. Obviously, he's had a successful career, but every time I see him, I was like, man, he just fights really awkwardly. It's hard to adjust to him. And Dvalishvili did it, and he did it well. And as the fight went on, the gap between Cejudo and Dvalishvili just opened up. And by the third round, he was just taking him apart. I will probably make a separate video on the legacy of Henry Cejudo, assuming he calls it a career after this fight, which I believe he probably will and probably should. But double champ and all this stuff, I would argue he had too short of a run to be an all-time great. But Dvalishvili wins. I said you got to take the over on this one. And if you wanted a more lucrative bet, go with Henry Cejudo. But Dvalishvili ends up winning. Ian Machado Gary over Jeff Neal. Folks, we tend to overplay robbery, people saying, oh my God, the UFC's fixed, all this stuff. It's a close fight. Ian Machado Gary won by split decision. So the split decision is an acknowledgement that it was a close fight, which it was. I picked Ian Machado Gary to win. The problem I had, and I forget who said it, I saw it on social media. Somebody said it looks more like Jeff Neal lost this fight than Ian Machado Gary won it. It's very, very true. Why? He brought a lot of physical pressure. He was the one chasing Ian Machado Gary around. He was advancing. Ian Machado Gary was retreating. But he wasn't throwing a lot when he was doing that. And especially rounds 2 and 3. Well, I believe it was it round? Yeah, rounds 2 and 3. Machado Gary started counterpunching more effectively. When you bring physical pressure, the strikes have to come behind it. When he was close and he did unload, he did land very well. But who else used to do that? It would drive me out of my mind. They would land good punches and then kind of end up falling into a clinch position. You get what I'm saying? They wouldn't sit their feet and stay at that boxing range, but they would throw punches and then end up clinching. Diaz does that all the time. Nate. Against Conor, I thought he was doing well in the second fight with his boxing. He would fall into these clinches all the time. I said, man, if you keep at range, you're doing really well in the boxing range. Same thing Jeff Neal was doing, where I thought he was doing really well at boxing range, and he would end up in this clinch. Now, they displayed on the screen the clinch control time for Jeff Neal was a lot, but that doesn't score like punches score. And Ian Machado Gary able to do enough to win the split decision. Whether or not you think it was fair, and a lot of people don't, did not rise to the level of robbery. Oh my God, I don't believe this. This is fixed for Ian Machado Gary. I don't believe that. It was a close fight, and Ian Machado Gary wins by split decision, but controversially. A lot of people don't agree with it. Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa. I was tempted in my original video, and I picked Robert Whittaker, and I picked him by decision. The thing about this fight that made me think, okay, should I go with the dog here? Because once again, he was a 2.5 to 1 dog, I think, Paulo Costa against Robert Whittaker. And Robert Whittaker's coming off a loss. Robert Whittaker is at the end of his career, probably. Only 33, but still been through a lot of fights, former champion. And as I said in my original video, giving my picks, he's in this dead zone of you're not going to fight for a title, and you're too good to be a gatekeeper, although they could use you as one. I don't know exactly what you're fighting for at this point in your career. And you're also not a kind of Max Holloway, you could argue, is in that position, but Max Holloway is so entertaining, he gets big fights because people like him and like watching him fight. Robert Whittaker hasn't finished anyone since Jacare. Yeah, it was in 2017. He's just not a must-see TV, oh my God, water cooler the next Monday kind of knockout guy. You don't talk about how amazing Robert Whittaker looked in this amazing finish. He doesn't typically do that. So he's kind of in this dead zone where I don't know exactly what he's fighting for. And I thought, well, if he's going to lose, it might be this fight. It wasn't that I had a ton of faith in Robert Whittaker picking him to win by decision. I have almost no faith in Paulo Costa at the elite levels. Big, strong, physical kickboxer. But his game isn't versatile enough to catch real experienced elite guys at the top level. He just doesn't have that. So as he was unloading these big punches, Robert was catching with the jab and the lead hook. The jab and the left hook were always right in Paulo Costa's face. Yeah, he landed a big wheel kick at the end of round number 1. That didn't steal him the round to me. I still gave Robert Whittaker the first round, even with that big shot. Number 1 didn't knock him down, and he seemed pretty good. He was able to clear his head and get back in the fight in round number 2. I didn't give him that round. But you see, Paulo Costa throws powerful strikes that are really basic. That's not going to get you over the hump at the elite level. The guys like Marvin Vettori, which you already fought him and lost to him, are going to tie you up and make it a clinch fest and take you out of your game. And the strikers that are there, Jared Cannonier, Israel Adesanya, are too technical for you. Sean Strickland, as weird as it might sound, is the only guy I can think of who might get into a brawl and end up getting knocked out by Paulo Costa. But Paulo Costa now, with this loss, is going to be ranked too low for Sean Strickland to really fight him if he can possibly avoid it. So that's the reason I pick Whittaker, is Paulo Costa just has a style that's too basic to have success at the elite level. This is, 2024 in the UFC and 185, man. Those guys can do a lot of things, and they're not going to fall into a brawling game. So that's why I picked Whittaker by decision. Whittaker won by decision. So on to the main event. The one upset that I was really behind and really sure about was Ilia Topuria or Alexander Volkanovski. I said third round knockout, ended up being a second round knockout. What can you say about this? What immediately stood out to me tactically was in the beginning of the fight, Volk was kicking and kicking and kicking and moving and kicking and kicking and moving. Not a bad strategy, but what it showed to me is he does not want to mix it up with this guy. Volk is a good in and out fighter. And what I mean by that is he can kick and kick, and then he comes in with power shots. He can kick and play the outside. He does have a decent jab. But then when he wants to throw power, he can do it. Certain fighters stay at the outside their whole time. Ian Machado Gary is not comfortable fighting on the inside. Anderson Silva was a great clinch fighter, but he generally likes staying on the outside. That's where his comfort level was. Volk isn't a guy who can sustain success on the outside the whole time. He threw a lot of leg kicks against Max Holloway in their first fight. But when Max tried to close distance, he was comfortable in the pocket throwing big punches. Since that fight, won the title, all title defenses. In the pocket is where he's at his best. And I could tell from the beginning he didn't want to be in the pocket against Ilia Topuria. And you can only stall that for so long. As I'm watching the first round, I said, at some point Topuria's going to get in and Volk's going to have to deal with him. And as Volk said after the fight, the guy just hits too damn hard. You take one to the chin by Ilia Topuria and you're going out. And that's exactly what happened in round 2. I thought he'd make it to round 3. He didn't. It was round 2. We have a new champion, Ilia Topuria, undefeated champ at 145 pounds. So the upset, I called that one. I called it by knockout. Got it wrong by 1 round. So good night for my picks, all in all. The only one I said that would be better money was Henry Cejudo. I was tempted to say the same thing with Paulo Costa. I just don't have any faith in Paulo Costa to get it done. So probably a further video about the legacy of Henry Cejudo, should he call it a career, which I think he will. And then, Alexander Volkanovski. And is he done? One of my producers I used to work for texted me during the fight, and he goes, it sucks to see Alexander Volkanovski at the end, that he doesn't seem as good. I wouldn't necessarily go that far. He didn't look, oh my God, this is bad. We didn't see, the end of the road BJ Penn or an end of the road Anderson Silva or an end of the road Chuck Liddell for people old enough to remember that. I didn't see that. I saw a guy who's still pretty good. I don't see a rematch going any better. I think Ilia is only going to get more confident and better. And kind of one of those guys who grows into really being champion. If he can't win the title, is that the end? That's a much more complicated question that I will dive into in a separate video. But for the picks, 4-1 on the night. I think I picked overs on all of them, and they were all overs. Good night for my picks, man. Let me know what you think and what you think of the card. And I will be talking about the future of Henry Cejudo, the legacy of Henry Cejudo, and the future and the legacy of Alexander Volkanovski. My next one. Appreciate you.